All right, thanks everyone for joining. I know it's super early or super late, so this time is probably the worst time ever to actually sync. But at the same time, I also wanted to give a chance to some folks from the APAC time zone to also participate. Forgetting that it's weekend for them already today. So I apologize for that. This is completely on me. I just didn't realize dates and days. So time zones are hard. This sync was scheduled because I wanted for folks who have been participating in discussions for what now, almost a week, to actually have a chance to grab a sync and get on the same line as much as possible on what are the actual steps rather than just corrective actions. What can we do to improve the situation going forward, even if it's longer term? And I think two competing things have been discussed over and over with some disagreement on whether this is going to be the solution or not. And one of them is the traversal IDs. And I checked with Alex Pooley earlier, and he mentioned that in about 1 week, they're going to start rolling out traversal IDs for GitLab org. So wanted to open up for folks. If you want to talk about this, go ahead. I'm way over my head here.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I spent a good chunk of the day looking through the Postgres 11.7 current version of Postgres, the selectivity code for estimating join selectivity, and based on that, I am even more confident that the switching from a semi-join to an inner join is a good move, and also I learned that that another option we have, which I just posted, Henrik actually already responded to this, that another option we have is adding a distinct select distinct to the select statement in the CTE. Is another way to avoid the hazardous code path. So if that happens, so I think we've actually got several ways to dodge the bullet on that. Some of which may be easier to implement. This is not an argument against the inner join, which we're already moving forward with. But if that turns out to not be practical for any reason, it's nice to have other options because these will produce different cardinalities. I think all of them would be a great deal better than what we're doing now. And with regard to the traversal IDs, the one thing I wanted to say about it is everything that I've seen so far makes me think that the traversal IDs will implicitly be completely immune to this problem. But, and this is a big but, we have to apply the updates to namespaces very slowly because actually setting those values is, I think, very, very likely to trigger the pathology that we're trying to prevent. The mechanism for that is not obvious, and I haven't written this down yet, and I really need to. But I can walk through it very quickly here, just to, I guess, share this non-obvious fact. So this is something I looked into in the context of the monthly CI minutes reset, which for months has been causing a performance regression, mostly in the APAC on call shift, and obviously recently it spilled over to EMEA as well. So I'm sure you're all familiar with it from that. The pathology is this: we do bulk updates for the CI minutes reset to the namespaces table. And this particular CTE that we've been focusing on in this week's incidents, I think follows the same pathology. And we found, I think we have a pretty good understanding now of what's special about the 200 row threshold for the estimated cardinality coming out of that CTE. And we can walk through that together if that's of interest. But the projected cardinality coming out of that CTE is, of course, based partly on the perceived number of live rows in the namespaces table. That number of live rows is coming from it's approximately what's stored in PG class's rel tuples field, but there's a big caveat, and this is the subtle part that I wanted to walk through. What the optimizer actually uses to figure, so anytime an analyzer of vacuum runs on a table, the two relevant table level statistics that we're going to talk about here are how many live rows are there in the table and how many pages are there in the table, and that's stored in rel tuples and rel pages on PG class. From that, you can obviously get a density measurement, how many live rows per page. The optimizer will attempt to, the optimizer knows that statistic is typically stale, and it's very cheap to find out how many physical pages are currently allocated to the table. So what it'll do is say, okay, last time we had a vacuum or analyze, this table had 1 million pages, and now it's got 100,000 additional pages. I'm making these numbers up. And now it's got 100,000 more pages. I'm going to take the row density from the historical result and assume that the same row density applies to those new pages. And that's where we get into trouble, because these bulk updates are adding new row versions, but not adding new live rows. And so this is going to overestimate the number of live rows in the table by proportionally how many additional blocks have been added as a result of these bulk updates. And that, I think, pushes us over the tipping point that we are kind of typically hovering around anyway during the CI minutes reset. And I suspect that any bulk update to namespaces is liable to do the same kind of, to potentially tip us over the edge. Does that make sense?
Cool. Makes a lot of sense. That's pretty much what you described yesterday as well, Andreas. You were talking about the same concern, yeah.
I was more thinking about growth of the table in general, like adding more rows. But that's even more frightening, because it's what you described, because it's we will have to do updates to do the traversal IDs unless we put them to a separate table.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is a one-to-one like second table like an option, or will it just have the same effect?
It won't have the same effect, but I think as long as we do these updates relatively slowly, I think it should be fine.
Right.
Slowly relative to how often we vacuum or analyze, that is. Like, I mean, a mitigation could be that we just start, like, doesn't even have to be part of the migration script. We could just say, you know, up the aggressiveness of auto vacuum on this table temporarily while we do these bulk updates.
Actually, can we let me briefly describe how we do this typically. So right now we do have only one mechanism to do that. It's background migration. So what we would typically do is go in and schedule a couple of jobs, maybe a few thousand, with a fixed batch size, 2 minutes intervals, and let that run for however long that takes. Problem with that is you don't have a good control over the batch size. So once that is scheduled, it's all in the queue already. We happen to work on a different mechanic right now that's going to be released next week, hopefully, that allows you to not schedule these jobs up front, but basically schedule them as they come in over time. And that also allows you to tune the batch size. So basically, thinking we could use that to have more confidence in starting with a small batch size, maybe even large intervals, see how that affects the rel pages, basically.
Yeah,
and then
great.
increase that over time so that we don't have to wait forever.
Cool, that sounds good. I'm a little unclear on how we maintain these fields once they're set. Like, pre-populating them makes sense, but like, I'm assuming that we have to roll out the code to maintain them and then backfill and then activate use of the field. Is that the sequence of events that we're planning?
For traversal IDs?
Yeah, for traversal IDs.
That's my understanding too, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I wasn't, that was a guess, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't off base on that.
Yeah, no. What about the CI minutes reset job? Isn't that also going to the namespaces table, or am I?
Nope, you're absolutely right. It's, yeah, and it's still a risk. Like, we're
comes up
fully
in
expecting it to still to happen again on April 1st.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Huh.
So whatever we do, we need to make sure we stop this migration around the end of the month, because we don't want both of those running.
Oh yeah, good point.
I was just looking at the first of the month in that new dashboard, and it's quite astonishing, like the rate of tuple changes on the namespaces table. Because I was trying to look at that live, because there is a live rows metric, but I don't think it's the same one, because it's the user tables live row metric, which I think is different from the one you mentioned.
It is, yeah. That the pgstat user tables is not; those are not optimizer statistics. Those are just information.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you described yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I just but it is worth still looking at that and seeing the tuple modifiers per second, and it's just like off the chart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just a question though, because I mentioned this in the issue, like the distinct change is kind of like, you could say like easier to change because it's in one place in the code. Like we have this class for handling hierarchy, and we could like add the distinct there.
So that gives us all the places that we use namespaces effectively.
If we do that change, would that make us like be confident that we could like migrate the rows in a larger batches, or we could proceed with the CI reset after we do this? Do we do some tests?
Yeah,
or like?
I think so. I think so. it might actually be that easy, if that is a straightforward code change to make.
Interestingly, the distinct would also be required for the inner join if you really want to make it a correct change. Otherwise, you will be getting duplicates possibly. So even that is similar in a sense for the fixes. Yeah.
So like the CTE that we're looking at, it includes a union between the records, and union is implicitly going to give us distinct output. And I think that's how we're. You're absolutely right, and I think that union is how we're kind of getting away without the, the select distincts. I was a little bit surprised that the optimizer doesn't notice that, but adding the distinct keyword gives it the clue that it needs. Yeah. And it's totally just a quirk of how the selectivity is estimated. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Adrian.
So you go ahead first, Andreas.
No, go for it.
I was just going to ask, because you've been looking at the Postgres code in so much detail, do you know, because there was discussion about this not being recreatable in Postgres 12, do you know, would you be able to confirm your gut instincts on that? Like, do you think that that's going to be, do you think that the Postgres 12 upgrade will also be a mitigation?
I suspect so, but I have really just been focused on the 11.7 code. I wanted to focus on production today. And,
of course, yeah. But the fact that you've kind of got it down to, like, presumably you're reading some C code, and then we can go look at that in 12 and see if it's sort of the same. That's really great news.
Absolutely, yeah. I haven't done it yet. I think it would maybe be like, maybe a half an hour to just look at the diffs and make sure I'm not, this is one of the relatively complex parts of the Postgres code. So I don't want to make like, snap judgments about it, but yeah. This is not my first time looking at this code, but it is my first time in a few years looking at this code, and it definitely has changed. So. Yeah, like 24 hours ago, I forgot that they had implemented a special code path for semi-joins. So that was that was why I was initially dubious about the inner join being useful, and then I was like, oh yeah, that totally will work.
I haven't yet totally looked into that, but maybe you already know the row estimate for the CTE. So about the 200. Where is that coming from exactly?
That's a hard-coded value. Oh man. Yeah. Do you want to see it? This is so kind of gross.
Oh yeah, sure. That's
Yeah, let me screen share for a second. Stop me if this is not interesting to everybody. Let's see, I've got little snippets here. This is it. Okay, so this is okay. So context. So the this is the function. This is the function for the equality operator when we're saying x dot key is equal to y dot foreign key, for example. This is what estimates the selectivity for an equality join. And its code is essentially saying what type of join are we doing. If it's an inner join, left outer join, or a full outer join, follow this code path. Otherwise, if it's a semi join, like which our in subquery is, then follow this path. Both of these lead to the same function. So that's what we're going to look at. This equijoin semi. So here we are in equijoin semi. First thing we do is try to get the number of distinct values for each of the columns. In my kind of made up examples, in the real world example, that would be like projects.namespace ID is the left hand field, and namespaces.id from the CTE is the right hand field in D2. Okay, great. So we've got those. How does this function calculate those num distinct? Well, there's a bunch of ways that it tries to calculate them, but essentially we fall through all the way to the bottom here, where we say the last 5 lines of this block of code is if the number of tuples in the table is less than this hard-coded pound defined value, which is 200 rows, this is our magic number, then go ahead and return the number of rows clamped to that value. So this is why if the estimated number of rows coming out of the CTE is less than or equal to 200, then it returns this value. But if this is not satisfied, then we return the 200 value, and critically we also set the flag that says I have no idea what the num distinct values is. So this is a generic made up dummy value. Oh, by the way, here's the 200. Okay, so this is the important bit. I'm going to scroll back up to our equijoin semi. This is the relevant bit where we say if we don't have a non-generic value for both sides of the join, then I'm sorry. So if we do have non-generic values for both sides, then we get to do some rational logic where we look at the ratio of the num distinct between the pair of tables. Otherwise, here's where that 0.5 comes from. It's literally 50% of the non-null values on the left-hand table, which is exactly what we were seeing. Andreas saw this first, I think. Isn't that nasty? I mean, not like you can do anything better, but.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. Anyway, I just had that handy, and I thought, it would be, gratifying since we've all spent a little bit of time looking at the results of this mayhem.
Totally. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the other hand of this, the other input is the estimate for the CTE itself. And this is.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So in this case, the left hand would be whatever table we're joining it to, like project.
Right.
Yeah, and the right hand would be the CTE.
But this is sort of the problematic one in quotes
yes.
coming in. So when that goes above 200, then it's a problem.
Yes.
As we can see. What I was wondering is where is it coming exactly from? Like how is the CTE estimate being established? And do we have some sort of influence on that? And
right.
We were joking yesterday and saying like, well, if this is sort of the average expected number for namespaces in the hierarchy, then you might be able to influence that a bit. But
yeah, potentially so. That's a great question, and it is one of my open questions as well. I don't know how not the n distinct, but the n tuples, the estimated row count coming out of the CTE. I'm not sure how a recursive CTE calculates that. The only table involved in that recursive CTE is the namespaces table, so it has to be derived from the namespaces tables, table statistics, and the column level statistics for potentially the column statistics for the namespace ID field, because that's the only one that we provide a filter value for. But how that plays out, I don't know how it would make a reasonable guess about how many layers of recursion you'd have for any given ID. That's not directly supported by any of the statistics, so I'm guessing that it's probably got some chintzy logic there too. And that's why I was really focused on how can we avoid that code path entirely. And I guess I didn't show that part of it, but in one of the same functions we were just looking at, the one that tries to infer how many distinct values. I should just, if you don't mind, I'll screen share again for a second. Let's see, I think I still have that up here. What's your name? Here you are. Okay. Yes. Okay. So this bit. So I'm not showing the raw source code because I kind of elided the sections that don't play into our problem. So this is the function that we saw being called for the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the join to estimate the number of distinct values. And essentially the logic is I'm gonna gloss over some of the bits here. So if this is a column that we actually have column level statistics for, then we get to do this happy logic that actually has meaningful values. And when we fall through to this point, we're kind of winging it with much less reliable statistics. And this is the bit that made me realize that if we add a distinct to our CTE, that we get to follow this code path instead. Effectively, this is a flag that gets, var data is a descriptor for the left-hand or the right-hand row source, whether it's a table or a subquery result, either way. Doing a select distinct sets this flag. So that's a way we can get here. So essentially what we get is if that flag has been set by doing a select distinct ID, blah, 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 then we set, some of you probably know this already, but in the PG statistic table, the num distinct field, if it's a positive value, then it's an absolute row count. If it's a negative value, then it's on a scale of 0 to -1, and it represents a proportion of the table of the table's rows that are distinct. And that's kind of explaining why they're doing this kind of unintuitive multiply by -1. So this is just essentially saying that that we're going to be -1 in our case because all of the rows are non-null in this case. So we'll get a -1 value for the for what proportion of the table of the table's total row count is unique values. And then we fall through to this piece here that says, okay, so if we do have a negative value for which indicates that we have this proportion of the total row count is going to be unique, then negate that again and multiply it times n tuples, so you get an absolute value for unique rows. And this is essentially what we get if we use the select distinct logic for our CTE. Did I answer the question this time, or did I flub it again?
That's great.
Yeah,
that's really, really helpful. Okay. So if we go with the distinct, we get to fix the problem in all the places because we're changing the active record relation or whatever, and it's quite a, it forces us down the right code path. So that seems like a really good. Is that being worked on already? Is there an MR for that?
No.
I just created an MR and I pushed it just to see if CI passes.
Of course you did.
Of course. Thank you, Henrik.
I don't know if it passes, but yeah, the only downside of this change though is like it's guess you say riskier because it changes all our hierarchy queries, right? But then I guess we could also feature flag it here and test it. But yeah, because the other option for a short-term fix is Stan opened the issue about, because what moving to inner joins, right? We moved one query to inner joins, changing the all projects method, but then all the other CTEs don't use that method yet, or like not all. And Stan's issue was basically saying we should move some of these like finders or some known queries that are slow to use this method. So downside here is like, it's harder to do because you gotta find all these places. Upside, I guess, is that the change is more localized and less risky, but yeah. And also maybe I just like to qualify that traversal ID thing. I think the 1 week that Alex said is like starting of the rollout. And I think starting rollout is, even the rollout, I think would take perhaps weeks, because this is not just about populating the traversal IDs. This is about changing all the queries to use traversal IDs too. And I don't think there's an MMR that changes it already or something, right? I'm not sure about the state, but I don't think so.
That makes
my understanding, which could well be wrong, it's more an assumption than an understanding, was that most of that is encapsulated in one place. Or is that not right? So most of the like the relationship and the Bayesian descendants query is encapsulated in one place. So even
yeah, right.
I totally agree that it's not
class,
trivial, and it will be a massive change, especially with the speed at which we have to do the rollout. But one of the things that I thought was in its favor was that it was fairly put in one place, if you want to say it like that.
It is possible that maybe it plugged into the object hierarchy class. Basically the same thing we're doing with the distinct, right? We're plugging it in the object hierarchy class. So it's possible.
That was my imagination, but yeah, obviously
cool.
I haven't tested that.
I think Andreas reviewed some of the code, right? So maybe you would know, or I don't know.
Sorry, I was just not following. What was the question?
Would you know if
yeah. Go ahead, Heinrich.
Yeah, would you know if the traversal ID MRs that are like lined up right now already would change all the hierarchy queries across the app without further code changes to every finder, every service, or like?
I would expect that, but I haven't followed over the last 2 weeks, I think. So Yanis and Patrick have been looking at this, I think. So I'm not totally sure, but I would expect it. Yeah.
But the code is sort of encapsulated in most of the logic would still be encapsulated in the hierarchy relation, or I'm going to get the wrong terminology, but you know what I mean. It's encapsulated in that place. So obviously we still need to do extensive testing and everything, but yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I like about any of the methods that we've talked about, whether it's the inner join that we're doing now or the adding the distinct, is that it's really easy to it's comparatively easy to convince ourselves that this is semantically equivalent to what we've got now. There's not going to be a logic change, and that's much harder to do with the schema change and the population and the questions about is it maintained properly? What are there are a lot more edge cases to consider. So I like the idea of, a change that we're making in the rush, having a high confidence that it's not introducing the subtle logic changes.
Mm-hmm.
For what it's worth, I like that aspect of what we're doing here.
Been trying to, just while we have been talking, I was looking last night and I noticed that there was one of those tuple events from about 110 to 120 UTC. I don't have a lot of information on it yet, but there was definitely about 70% of the tuples were coming from the namespaces table. I just noticed that while we were looking at that other graph. But I can't find like a single smoking gun. So I don't know, maybe it was just random, but I'm looking at that.
Graham posted it in Slack. I forgot what was the finding, but yeah, let me find it.
Oh, okay. It was noted. Oh, there was an alert as well. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the time from it, but I definitely was chatting with him at the time when one of those alerts triggered, and we talked about
Okay.
he was very concerned about whether or not it required immediate action. I think this new alert is mostly going to be
triggery.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it can give us if it corresponds with an aptX or an error rate change, then it's a really good clue about where to start looking. But I think maybe by itself it might be a little bit prone to false alarms.
But
false alarms not.
I agree. Like, I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way that we can kind of tune it back, especially over the weekend. But I'll think about that a bit.
Yeah. What if it's a non-paging alert and but could we make it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. If it's non-paging, then I'm not sure it would actually be visible enough to be a useful clue.
So what I've heard other people do, and this is like too big a change to put in before the weekend, but basically pretty much all cause alerts, except for maybe a handful that things are really going to go bad if you don't address this. You make all cause alerts non-paging. You don't get a paging cause alert, but when you get a symptom alert, all the cause alerts are attached to that. So it's like, here's a symptom, this has gone down, and did you know you've got the tuples problem, you've got this, and this, and they're almost like attachments. Yeah, it's a
fantastic.
But,
yeah, I agree. That's not like a Friday change, but that's a fabulous change.
Because then you sort of see the menu of like, these are the things that are wrong right now.
Context.
Your users are having a bad time as well.
Yeah, totally with you. That's fantastic. I love it.
Can we go back to the statistics one more time?
Yeah, please.
Because I see comments on the production incident issue. Alvaro keeps pointing out that this has been a statistics degradation that led to it, basically. And we know that that this has been caused by the Postgres bug. That's basically when you're over the threshold, you're doing something that is very wrong in that situation, basically. However, the statistics itself, they have changed because this led to the going above the threshold. But do we know that this has been a degradation in statistics, really? Like, did we have wrong statistics?
No, we didn't have wrong. This is a modeling error. It's not a statistics error.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though the analyze was basically ending that incident for us, because it changed the statistics, this has been rather on the lucky end because
exactly.
This is random sampling on the table, so you're getting few. Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've been super lucky that Analyze is we're living on the edge of the cliff and we jump over the cliff, and Analyze is kind of like a bungee cord bringing us right just back to just before we fell off the cliff. It's not a good house to live in.
Right. Yeah.
Wait, does that mean that we were on the edge of meltdown? Am I understanding that correct? Oh my God.
Yeah, I think we've been on the edge of meltdown for at least months. That's my impression. In fact, I think that we actually get the regressive execution plan fairly often, and it doesn't manifest as a meltdown unless we have a lot of queries being affected by it. Does that make sense? Like,
and also the first of the month, like how long has the first of the month thing been a problem on the first of the month? Like
6-7 months?
5 months?
Yeah.
6-7 months. And maybe that was the signal all along.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And when I say this, I mean us not ignoring the signals.
Well, I don't think,
Or rather, us ignoring the signals.
I don't have a good answer to that.
You don't have to have a good. You just give me some ideas.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that we have so many. This is just like my opinion as an on-call engineer. We have so many incidents that it's very difficult to get focus on one incident for long enough to really track down, the causal chain. That's been kind of a regular frustration for me. So with the CI minutes thing, I've been working the APAC shifts sometimes, and it's a different set of alerts that you get in APAC versus EMEA versus Americas. That's when I really got enough time to focus on that and get closer to understanding the causal chain, and that in turn helped me understand the incident that we're talking about this week, because they shared some important characteristics. I guess in that sense, I feel like even though individual incidents often don't get quite enough traction, I guess we kind of still build up communal knowledge over time. I don't know. This, like I said, I don't have a good answer for this. That's the closest I got.
So from what I understood, we've been focusing on this CI reset from the application side somewhat, while all along, actually, this was not only the application problem, this was a database problem as well. Can I say that? Is that
yes,
a relatively
yes.
okay summary?
The changes that we're making to the application are to work around. I mean, like all models are, an approximation of reality. They introduce a lot of simplifications, and a lot of times those models work well for us. Like, I mean, the approximation, the estimation for how costly an execution plan is going to be doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough to differentiate between horrible plans and decent plans, and it does that really well most of the time. But this is a case where the model is just far enough away from reality that it breaks us. That's not the fault of our application. But it is something that we can work around, especially understanding how specifically how it breaks. We can restructure our query to avoid that pathology, and that's essentially what we've done here. And I think with what this group has discovered over the last 48 hours, especially, I think we have a really good shot at, like, if we have a similar problem with another group of queries, I think we'll be able to respond to it much more quickly. Now that we understand the nature of how the model is broken. And I guess also, Andreas, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard, it might have been you, I think I saw someone say that we're pretty close to moving to Postgres 12 anyway. Mm-hmm. And that does make meaningful changes to this particular part of the costing model. So in that sense, this particular problem shouldn't happen again. Does that sort of answer the question? I know it's only a halfway answered.
There are no perfect answers here, right? Like, we were just chatting.
Yeah. Okay.
And from a development perspective, and I don't want to sound like I'm ranting, so
no, go for it.
But basically, I
go ahead. You're allowed to.
We do know that we have, in certain areas, we do have problems that affect the database, and CI minutes is an example of that. CI builds is also an example of that, and this is sort of well known. I think if you look at the CI data model, this has been underway, sort of discussing re-architecturing it for many months now, and it's been paused in between because I think there were other priorities, basically. So it's not that we don't know these problems, but I think we're not being very or as effective as we could be in sort of focusing on them and shipping actual solutions to them, and that's a problem in quite a few areas, I think.
Right. I guess what I'm thinking about is we are giving warning signals. That's what you're saying, all of you. We are giving warning signals, but we can't get the prioritization right, given that there are other competing priorities from people who are scheduling things. What do we do to raise the alarms and pull the end on cord? Well, first of all, what is the end on cord?
I think it's hard to tell. I mean, there are a lot of like warning signals or problems in the application, right? But it's hard to tell which ones are the ones that could, you know, cause the site to go down or could cause like catastrophic effects, right? It's probably identifying which ones are the most risky problems, right? Is the problem.
These are complex systems, right? Like, yeah.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is we don't have to pinpoint this one is going to be the one that brings us down, because we can't, right? Like that's clear. But what we can say is that we have this class of problems that have usually generated some instability for us. So when we classify a problem this way, this goes on the top of all of the lists that we have, and it needs and requires focus, right? So how do we classify them? Like, I know that is also hard, but maybe we should think about that a bit.
And some of these problems, I think you cannot really solve them on the technical level only. Like that has been, I think, a learning from the database sharding discussion. For example, you cannot expect to come in and sort of change everything under the hoods from a technical level and keep doing the same things on the product level. So, for example, something that we're also discussing for a long time is retention policies. Like, can we keep all data forever? You know, we are going to have a lot more growth in the database, and keeping data forever is very expensive. So that is a product decision that needs to be made, that we can actually drop some data or archive it or do something different to it. So it's not always only on the technical level. And for my feeling, that's not been picked up in some areas. It's not been picked up as much. And we were trying to fix things on the technical level only.
Okay. With the risk of saying this in a recorded call, should I grab a coffee chat with you, Andreas, to talk a bit more about, in detail about this? Because I think there is a bit more behind what you're saying, just to uncover some of the things, and maybe I can help with the organizational side.
Yeah, I would love to. Sounds good.
All right, cool. We'll do that. Awesome. I don't want to interrupt this great conversation. We still have 5-10 more minutes, but I also want to be mindful of all of your times. So you should tell me, like, should we continue the conversation, or I think we kind of are aligned with what needs to happen. Everyone happy?
Yeah, just one, Heinrich, what's the next steps with your MR?
Yeah, the pipeline just came back, and there's several failures. Like distinct doesn't work with an order by. The order by expression must appear in the distinct. So yeah, I'm not sure if there are quick fixes, but I'll try to see. But the question is, do we also continue with the other like quick fix that we're doing, like moving to inner joins or like for the all projects method, or do we focus on this? Or
maybe that's what we should just make a call on with the information that we have at hand right now. Like, what's the best way forward?
Or focus on the PG upgrade?
So
do we want to figure out whether we need to pull that timeline in? I mean, I don't know if we can. I just want to put it out there and say maybe we need to.
And I'm wary of making that call without any of the
I'm not making that call. I'm just saying I would make a suggestion for us to go and ask that.
I kind of lean away from rushing major version bumps. I would prefer to pursue any of the options that we're already pursuing, like the either the inner join or the select distinct. Well, those are I think the best two options that we've got. Although there are certainly other options as well.
Because definitely we can't wait for traversal IDs, right? We need these shorter term fixes, right? Yeah.
We have to, yeah.
So yeah, it's either we do one, do both. I mean, we could do both, right?
Yeah, true.
It's a matter of resources, I guess.
Yeah, and we don't even have to pick the same strategy for every part. We can mix and match if we need to.
From the resource point of view, like, I think that it's quite easy to, like, what we're talking about here is being right on the edge of a cliff, and like GitLab.com being down for a day or more. And I think that from a resource point of view, that shouldn't be really the talking point.
No, from my side, what I want to find out is exactly what parallel tracks do we want to take. And once we do that, I'll find a way to highlight that this has no alternative, basically, right? Like, this work needs to happen. So I wrote a couple of things that make no sense here. So focus on PG12, that we know, right? That is something that needs to happen, whether it happens first or last, it doesn't matter. It's going to help us in the longer term. So I wrote continue with joins. That was the inner joins, or what was the change, right? Inner joins.
Yeah, inner joins. Yeah.
So that is basically the feature flag that Stan turned on earlier. So we have this rolling slowly in production. And then is the work on distinct in parallel with this or an alternative to it?
Yeah, it's both. It's both an alternative. It can be instead of or in addition to. Does that make sense? So it
yields the same result in the end.
Yeah, both of them will avoid the hazardous code path, either in isolation or together.
Do we know, like, do we have, how many different code places in the code do we have?
We've got 63. On the primary, there's 63 different ones, and they're actually in an issue, in a snippet. I think it's probably at the top of GitLab or GitLab snippets, because we don't have that many.
But this is different.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is different queries that we're seeing on a database, but they might come from the same place in the code base. So I'm just wondering, how many, if we had a list of things that we need to tackle, maybe then we can find people to individually tackle that. But I'm not quite sure how many different things we're looking at in the code base.
I would probably start, like, you could probably start from that list, because I mean, you can actually get the list with the marginalia in it, and you could get, like, I suppose the marginalia is kind of confusing because the same query might be used in two different endpoints, but you'll only see it from one. You can either go to it from the Ruby side or from the Postgres side, right?
Yeah, I linked an issue that Stan created on the doc regarding the inner join. So there are like a few places we identified in the finders, but it's not comprehensive, of course, but yeah.
The nice thing about it is if we get 30% of them, we're still 30%, at least 30% safer.
Yeah.
So missing a few just means we have more work to
do. Definitely. We don't have some sort of ownership model for tables, do we? I have a vague recollection that we do.
We have a rough sort of ownership. If you can find a group that is sort of directly related to the table, then it's clear, but this is not always the case. So
that is so strange. It didn't occur to me that I'm sorry, that's so weird.
It's, everything at GitLab's a stage group. Like, if you look in there, we could use those, we could go through a bunch of those and figure out who, CI pipelines, that's easy. We know who that is. Issues, because you can, often it's kind of the first table that you see in the query. Project mirror data, that's probably the source code team. So this might be the quickest way to kind of break down, but then obviously, hopefully those teams would know roughly where that is in the code base. If you gave them a SQL query, they could tell you. Would it be better to go with from an ordering of most like highest duration or highest call count first? High frequency first.
High frequency first is what matters. Yeah.
And we can get that. We can get that from these queries. So that's a good start.
Does everybody agree with that? High frequency is top priority. Okay.
So we can compile a list.
Yeah, definitely the jobs request one was like one of the important ones. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
We saw that during the incident.
Oh, so many incidents. Yes. If we knock that one out, I think we'll be so much happier.
So
can I, before Andrew, before you ask, Andreas, I don't want to put more work on you, but I really would appreciate if someone with more database authority like yourself actually writes up a tiny bit of a snippet of all of these parallelization workflows and why, right? So we are focusing on PG12 because, focusing on inner joins because, distinct, and so on. And how is that gonna move a line a bit? You don't have to write a novel about it. It can be just like a small block of text, so I can actually use this going forward, because I'm gonna butcher it. Like, I'm not gonna do it justice on why all of these things are important.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to do that? It doesn't have to happen today. It can be on Monday or something like that.
Okay. Where should I put it on?
Feel free to put it here in the doc, and I'll move to organize epics and so on.
Okay, sounds good.
Unless you have an idea where you want to, and then just go for it. A doc is fine for now.
Yeah, I'll do that on Monday if that's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. Thanks.
I wonder though, like the technical change to the query is rather, it's a technical change, right? It's not that we are, it's purely on the SQL level if you like to think about it that way. It's not that we're changing, we expect to change domain logic, anything. So I wonder if it wouldn't, what is the efficient way of organizing that? Is it like finding those 10, 15 examples and then fanning that out to the backend groups? Or maybe we find a few people that know the problem, that know the solution, and then we go to this and sort of change those bits.
I do feel a little bit concerned with having this thing and then dropping it on like 10 different stage groups and saying like, make this change as soon as you can. There's a lot of risk in that.
It's not going to work. I'm telling you right now, we're talking about different urgency than regular work. This is urgent, right? So we need to nominate basically people who are going to drive this into the product.
Obviously, Adam is someone that can help you.
I don't want to name names right now, but I just want to like, maybe we need to figure out who those folks are. It can be also in the doc, but also it can be with the EMs, right? Like with the people who are prioritizing. But what we want to state as a path is this can't go through the regular prioritization process. This has to go through urgent actions. And I'm happy to help with that.
So to recap, what we need is basically a list of things that we need to change. It should be in priority order. And then we fan it out to only a few people that are sort of helping with implementing this.
How about you step at a time? Let's get that list and then we'll talk, okay?
That sounds good.
Let's not make all the decisions right now.
I've just put a list into the doc, but I'll cross-reference them back to the actual queries because it's just query IDs at the moment, but there's a list over the past day, highest frequency CTEs. And really the top 3 are way and above the next set. So those top 3 are the big ones.
When you say CTE, is that recursive CTE always, or is it also regular ones?
What I used was I searched for like with recursive. So that was, it's not actually CT, it's actually on any recursive queries in the database, but they're all on, I don't think we have any recursive queries that are outside of that, as far as I've seen. So, but it was on the keyword with recursive that I was searching.
Yeah, so with the snippet, the highest one is, the first rows are the ones that are highest frequency, right? Yeah.
That's right. So no. Sorry, there's a second. There's a link in the second link to a Thanos link, and there's 3 queries that are like 184 per second, 129 per second, 115 per second, and then down from there it's 47. So the next one down is substantially, and that's 7634, which is kind of interesting because it looks like it's just namespaces joining namespaces. That's the highest one, without any third-party things, which I don't know quite what. That might be authorized projects or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised because all it seems to be doing is recursing. And then I'll put these in the doc. The second one, that's weird. Did I just copy and paste? Second one seems to be the same. And then the third one is CI pipelines, based in Ancestors CI sources pipelines. So, you know, if we could tackle those 3, we'd make a big dent.
Also, something to note is that not all these queries follow the same thing, right? Where something ID equals like the CTE. It's I see there are like different kinds of queries where the recursive clusters and all that is different. There's also another one I see at the top of the snippet file of queries where like we do like Jira subscriptions .namespace ID equals the CTE, and these are not as bad because the count on the Jira subscription table is like much smaller than projects. So when you multiply, you know, the PG heuristic of half of the tables, like tuple size or whatever what that is, should not be as, you know, catastrophic. But yeah.
So go ahead, Andreas.
The pattern we're looking for is the semi-join, right? So we're only basically looking for where in and then seeing the recursive CTE.
Okay, I can run it again with that then. So so it's got to be where in and then the semi-join. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I can run it again and just limit it down to those. I think those 3 top ones that I mentioned. No, I don't know. I didn't check, but I'll rerun that with those.
Cool.
So just to check that first one.
Just to be crystal clear, it's a semi-join or an AT-join. Yeah. So if you find a not in, that counts too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good point. No.
I'm just not sure how you're running your search, so I wanted to make sure that was going to be included. I'm not sure if we even do that, but
I'll try to figure something out. You going offline, but I'll run it by Andreas, and then we can put that into.
Sweet, sounds great.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Let's stay in touch. I'll be the coordinator for now until we find a solution, and let's move ourselves out of the edge. I don't like this feeling. All right, have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers.